Pihole seems to be running. If I go do a search for, say, Yahoo, because we know the Yahoo website's full of ads. Here on the right hand side where you would normally see, well, see, there's the text to say this is an advertisement, it's just blank. So it works, definitely, which is good. Awesome. Only downside is I don't quite know what I did. Okay, so when I say I don't quite know what I did, what I mean is I tried probably 20 different solutions offered by people online and had no luck until I formulated something in my head using a combination of 2 or 3 things, and suddenly I was presented with the active DNS status. To try and lay out what I did, obviously the first speed up was the fact that I'm using a Cloudkey v1 from Ubiquiti to run Pihole, which has its inherent problems because it is a very limiting piece of hardware. It's very locked down. It's made by a manufacturer, namely Ubiquiti, to do one thing, and that one thing is to run Unifi software. Now, step number 1 for getting Pihole up and running is to disable Unifi, remove all the Unifi related software, etc. Fair enough, or easier, should I say. Now, in some of the previous videos where I showed that there is a guide that shows that you can run Pihole on Debian 8, but that's very much defunct now, and as far as I can work out, it does really require Debian 10 or later, which again is not a big problem because there is a guide for upgrading it, which is also easy enough. It's just a case of updating the sources lists, then running the update, basically. Simple as that. Now, this bit does take about 45 minutes. That was definitely one of the slow parts of the installation, short of the actual troubleshooting and fault finding. Anyway, once that part's done, the actual Pihole installation can supposedly begin. So step 1 is remove Unifi and upgrade to Debian 10, and then basically run the install. And as you'll know from my earlier videos, that's where some of the issues came to light for several reasons. Missing dependencies and several missing packages, specifically PHP and a host of other ones like SQLite 3, and yeah, if you look at the guides, there's a full list of what's missing. So even once you've installed that, all the missing dependencies, all the additional packages, you've got your correct version of PHP installed that is supported. And if you remember, I had to go back and check which version of PHP comes shipped with Debian 10, because after this initial update, this did not update PHP for some reason. I was still stuck on version 5 or whatever, which is correct for Debian 8. What we needed was to do an update to version 7 or more, which is what comes shipped with Debian 10. Forms part of this. Missing dependencies, PHP, a load of other packages, I think there were 6 in total. Get them installed, and then at that stage, Pihole might or might not be running. Bear in mind, I did also have the issue of git clone not working the first time round. What seemed to fix that was doing a reset of the Cloudkey. I'm not sure why that fixed it. This wasn't working at all until the reset was done. Following the reset, which puts it back to Debian 8, so you do the update Debian 10, then you can run the install and it works. Because one of the initial blockers I was having was the install was crashing at the point of cloning the GitHub repo. So that's a problem in itself that I didn't really fix. It just happened to fix itself with a reset. So again, not sure exactly what happened there. Once I fixed this, that's when I realized the PHP version mismatch. So the Git in general, that application, that service, fix that, get the correct version of PHP, and once this was done, that gave us the green tick, so to speak, that this was installed. Still weren't home free, so to speak, at this stage. So once Pihole was installed, and especially with Cloudkey, you need to be sure to disable Nginx, because that's what's used by default for the Unifi services. Disable that, and then if I remember correctly, I end up having to run a Pihole repair to get light HTTPD running again. Another workaround for this is to leave Nginx, which runs on port 80, and then just change this to run on port 81. But it's easy enough to just get rid of that and leave this to run on port 80, because then you can at least access your Pihole through the admin page without having to enter a port number. Don't worry if this doesn't make sense. If you were to run through this install yourself, it would all make a lot more sense. Right, next page. So when I got to the point of having the Pihole UI up and running, two things stood out to me. So at the top was the red light that said DNS service not running, and when checking the settings there was some sort of a PHP connection error, and that led to some PHP file where this connection stemmed from. However, don't concern yourself with this PHP file because the error is not in this file. That error is there because there's an external problem. There's nothing wrong with the Pihole installation as such. This is alluding to why this isn't working. So if you run a full debug, you can get information as to what's going on, and basically all of it points to the exact same thing, that this PHP error. So one thing to do is check which port numbers are running on your server, or in this case the Cloudkey. And obviously, so we've got a web server, so I was looking for port 80 for the web server, which I know was up and running. Then two other ports that are needed is 53 and 4711. So the FTL service, which is part of the Pihole service, uses port 4711, and this is a standard DNS query port, or the HTTP, I should say, HTTP port. So the first few times I went to check which ports are running, that was missing. I was getting port 80 and then weirdly port 5353, which I thought had something to do with DNS. Transpires it doesn't, so we can ignore that. After a lot of reading and trying various things, there was mention of some people saying DNSMasq that runs on port 53, and initially that is used in the in the Pihole installation, I think, in some way, but this ultimately needs to be disabled. And when I did a status check on this, it basically told me that it was not found. There was no such service as DNSMasq, so not quite sure what was going on there. But in the home straight of working out what was going on there, one other thing I noticed was that when doing like NS lookup, for instance, even one for Google, I was getting no response. That's alarming because it means even the default DNS server isn't configured. I don't quite know what happened here or how this disappeared, but when I checked the DNS server settings, so there's a particular file, resolve.conf, and that was empty, which is no good because I wanted this to point at something, so I manually had to go and edit that. Just chucked in the Google and Cloudflare IPs to that file. Then suddenly I was able to perform NS lookups. That put me one step closer because now I knew that the Cloudkey at least had an outside connection. So that seemed to be one of the major issues with the overall connectivity. Then went off on a tangent, or several tangents of search as to what could be causing these various things. And then I was reading a bit more about DNSMasq, what that does, what this error can allude to, and why these ports might not be up and running, or why they're not binding, so to speak. So what I ended up doing was I installed DNSMasq, because if you remember it said it wasn't found. That successfully bound to port number 53, which is all well and good. So 53 then became open. After having done this, I ran the Pihole repair and noticed this time round, actually no, I didn't run the Pihole repair. The first thing I did was I did a master reinstall, so to speak. So it effectively got rid of any settings changes I'd made. Then after that master reinstall, I did run the repair, and then I noticed there was a few lines where it says about stopping DNSMasq, and then there was a note about disabling DNSMasq with another note to say now FTL can use 53 blah 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 without the need for DNSMasq. And I thought, okay, that's quite interesting. So the Pihole repair uses DNSMasq to set something up, and then it disables it once FTL or once Pihole is able to use port 53 for itself, and then it disables DNSMasq. So I thought, okay, so that should theoretically work now, because I didn't get any errors on the repair. But then when I checked Pihole status, that told me that DNSMasq was using port number 53 and Pihole couldn't run. That's weird, because I thought it just disabled that. So then what I ended up having to do was manually disable DNSMasq, still with the log of what I did here exactly. So it said, failed to create listening socket, disable DNSMasq, check the port was closed, then manually started Pihole DL, which gave me a thumbs up, it's all up and running. I checked the status on that, and it gave me the thumbs up and running. Then I checked the web UI, that was up and running. And then I changed my DNS on my router, and that's now connected. I hope that explains or helps someone else troubleshoot getting Pihole up and running. It's a very convoluted way. I know doing it like this might not be the best, but it kind of runs through the thought pattern on paper. This kind of very perfectly represents how it all looked in my head as well. That's where we started, do the upgrade, hit an error, I had to reset, go back to that, find that there were missing dependencies, PHP version mismatch, so get PHP updated. Make sure you're only running one web server. If you are running two, make sure you know which port each one is running on. Double check that you've got DNS resolution working on your server, because that's half of your errors. Also, I should mention, with DNS service not running, I was unable to get updates running, which kind of also tells me, there's no connection going on there. Check what ports are active, if you've got missing ports, or what ports are bound to. If you haven't got the ports there, that means those services aren't running. Run through the Pihole repair, if need be. Revert to the master copy, run the Pihole repair. Just double check that what it says is disabled is actually disabled. Just manually start everything again. I don't know what's going to happen now if I reboot the Cloudkey. At some point I'm going to have to do it to just see that it is still up and running, because sometimes it does give some weirdly sporadic results when rebooting. Other than that, I think it's all good for now. So I will report back when it breaks, or when I have to do an update and that breaks it, because that seems to be a common thing that people report. I'm going to leave it there. So happy ad blocking, and that confirms it. Pihole running on Cloudkey V1 even in 2024, as if by magic.